Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bryce, and I want to welcome you to my conversation or perhaps review of a movie called Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. Now, before I jump into this conversation, I would just want to say that I'm very excited to have you here, whether or not you are seeing me on YouTube or some other platform of your choice, or if you're just listening to the podcast on audio right now. I'm super happy that you're here. And for those of you who have been following my videos for a long time now, you'll know that this format is going to feel a lot differently. I decided about a month ago, I took some time off from reviewing movies on YouTube, that I'm not going to do the whole video editing jump cut reviews like I used to do for a couple reasons. One, I'm grown and I do what I want, which is very fun and very powerful to say. But the other thing is I fucking hate video editing. I've been reviewing movies on YouTube and other platforms for a couple of years now. Editing has taken up way too much of my time. I don't like it. It doesn't help me convey information that I feel about a movie in any other way. And I think creatively it really bogged me down because I felt like I was just conforming to a style that so many other movie reviewers have had on YouTube, and I got sick of it, and I think other people are sick of it. So I think I'm just going to be fully authentic as me as possible and talk about these movies in much more of a conversational type way. So if I am not looking directly into the camera like I am right now, get used to it, because I'll probably just have my eyes drift every which way, because like I said, this is going to be a little bit more of a relaxed style of things. And I think if I'm a little bit more relaxed, you guys can enjoy in on the conversation a little bit more. Plus it allows for lengthier episodes. So for those of you who are on a commute right now, driving to work, one, have an awesome day, and two, these will be a little bit better at occupying that time. So with all of that down and out of the way, 2 minutes in already, let's talk about Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. So, first, what is this movie about? So, jumping on over into IMDb here. So, Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, the official synopsis from IMDb kind of reads like this. A charming thief who's played by Chris Pine and a band of unlikely adventurers embark on an epic quest to retrieve a lost relic. But things go dangerously awry when they run afoul of the wrong people. Now, adding my own spin onto that synopsis overall is a little troubling, because that is all true. That synopsis from IMDb is perfectly accurate. However, it's a little cryptic. In a nutshell, what happens in this movie: Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez's characters, I can't remember their names off the top of my head, they are raising Chris Pine's daughter. It's not both of their daughters together. Chris Pine's character had a wife in a previous time, and she was tragically killed. Don't worry, that's not a spoiler. This is all revealed to you within the first 5-10 minutes of this 2-hour, 14-minute runtime. Basically, they do a job, it goes awry, they are imprisoned, and one member of their band of thieves, who's played by Hugh Grant, ends up looking after Chris Pine's daughter. Basically manipulates her into thinking that Chris Pine left her, thereby creating this giant separation between the two of them. And Chris Pine has to do his best to, one, escape this prison and also get his daughter back. However, Hugh Grant keeps manipulating his daughter and taking that relationship and essentially making it toast. So Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, they're banished away from Hugh Grant's character and his daughter, and what they have to do is they have to find a way back into their kingdom, domain, their realm, if you were, in order to reunite them again and make things right. So if that was too confusing, I realize I didn't put that very eloquently. I encourage you to just go on YouTube, look up a quick synopsis of the movie, and decide for what the movie is going to be about. But having said all of that, what did I actually think of the movie? So, this movie was perfectly fine. It wasn't a bad movie. I didn't dislike it. I think that the final act won me over quite nicely. I think that the movie is going to be a fun experience for those of you who love Dungeons and Dragons and you want to go have a good time at the movies. I think you're all going to be very satiated by this experience. For someone like myself who has no affinity whatsoever to Dungeons and Dragons, the game, the intellectual property or IP, if you will, behind it, I won't remember the movie in T-minus 1 month, 2 month, 3 months from now. That could be for one reason or another, me being an amateur movie reviewer, critic, whatever you want to call me, if you will. I just see too many movies, and this one is not going to stand out in my mind, which is fine. Not every movie I see is going to do that. But I will say I am thankful that the movie gave me a fun time. It gave me a little bit of laughs, and overall an experience that I recommend for you all to have. Having said all of that, let me kind of touch upon the cast and the characters here and what they really bring to the table. So, first off, the people who brought this movie to us, it is directed by, as you can see, John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein, who also wrote this movie in tandem with a guy named Michael Giglio. I am not familiar with their work as far as I know. It's really interesting when I see multiple directors on one movie. That can cause problems, but for this duo, I think they did just fine here. Other duos that do that, if you're familiar with the work of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, are the directors of that, Lord and Miller. They're a directing duo that does well. The Safdie brothers is another director duo that do really well. Of course, they're brothers, so that kind of checks out. They do well enough to direct this movie. It is less so of a Dungeons and Dragons RPG feeling movie and more so a comedic heist film about a band of thieves who is just trying to very simply get a relic so that they can free someone they love from the clutches of someone sinister. Very much in a nutshell. In fact, I wish I would have given that summary earlier on when I was talking about the synopsis of the movie. So when it comes to the stars of this film, so you're going to recognize a lot of names from several projects on this movie, and some of these actors you'll probably recognize, but you don't know where from, so I'm here to help you out with that. So first off, starting with Chris Pine here. So Chris Pine, he plays the main character in this film. Can't remember his character's name. I'm not going to look it up because time is precious, but just know that he is the star of the film. He is able to change tones quite often. He can go from being the very thievy type of person to more of a what's the term I'm looking for here? More of a sentimental, loving father. He context switches very well in that domain. Is this like one of his all-time performances that I will remember him for? Maybe. Time will tell. Was he good in the movie? Yeah, absolutely. Did I like his character? Sure. Did I feel an affinity for his character? I don't really believe so. And I think that that's actually a criticism overall that I have with this movie, is that it didn't really do a good job of getting me hooked into any of these characters or really get me to care, but I'll touch upon that a little bit more later. Who else we have in this movie is the honorable, the very world famous and tenured actor, Michelle Rodriguez, who I am a big fan of. I think she is the best performer in this movie. She's the brawn of the group, right? You've got the cunning thief in Chris Pine. You've got the sorcerer in I'm blanking on the actor's name at this point. I guess I will take a second to look that up. And Justice Smith, who plays Simon. And with Michelle Rodriguez, who plays Holga, you've got this brawny character who is kind of the muscle of the group. And she does really well to make you buy into that fact that she is a brutish character. And I think that she makes for the most exciting, depthly character throughout this film. You learn the most. I would argue you learn the most about her, almost more than Chris Pine's character, who I just looked up, and his name is Edgin. I don't even think they say that in the movie once, but here we are. But overall, Michelle Rodriguez, if you're looking for actors to stand out in your mind in this movie, she's definitely the one. Another name you might recognize, Regé-Jean Page. He is, I'd say his stock is rising. I am not super familiar with his work. The only work I am familiar with him in is The Gray Man, which is a Netflix film that came out about a year ago now. It's getting close. It came out in 2022 on Netflix. He plays kind of a noble sort of hero in this film, and he sells that character very well. He's almost like snobby in a way, which I think totally works for him. And I think it really lent itself well to the movie. He's not in it as much as the film or the marketing would lead you to believe. In fact, it's kind of a shame when it comes to the marketing of this movie. All the funniest moments, aside from a couple or maybe in the trailers, which I think is kind of a little disappointing. I don't love it when trailers do that, and maybe that's a case to avoid the trailer altogether if you're able to, but Regé-Jean Page, he did just fine. He definitely did better in this movie than he did in The Gray Man. I did not like his performance in The Gray Man. He also really recently, I believe in the last few months or so, hosted an episode of Saturday Night Live, which was pretty entertaining. So some food for thought there. Justice Smith, he plays the sorcerer character of this film. Get a better look here to see what he looks like, so some of you might recognize him. If this guy looks familiar, he does well in the film. I liked his performance. If he looks familiar, he is in one of the Jurassic World movies. I believe he's in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. And I can't remember if he's in Jurassic World Dominion or not. That's another movie that came out a year ago. But that's where you'd recognize him from if you see him. Does he do well in the movie? I think so. I enjoyed his performance overall. And then lastly, we've got Sophia Lillis. Sophia Lillis, I can't remember what role her character played exactly. But if you recognize her, she was in It Chapter 1. I forgot what the name of her character was in that too, but she also does well in this movie. And I think in tandem between Sophia Lillis, Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, and why am I forgetting names all of a sudden? Justice Smith. I think the four of them work well in tandem because they have the most screen time in this movie. They make it entertaining. They make it fun. You can feel like they each play a very distinct role. They feel like they're all their own unique personalities, which is nice. And I think overall it makes for a fun experience. Like when you're on this ride with these four characters, you are having fun. You don't dislike any of them. The movie actually gets you to appreciate each one of them for what they are. And I think overall it makes the experience just a lot better. Having said that, so I promised, and I teased a little bit earlier, talking a little bit about these characters. My issue with all of them in this movie is the fact that the movie doesn't do a good job of really getting me to care about any of them. The reason for that is because I think this movie has a really bad problem of jumping around a lot within the first two acts. Now, a little disclaimer here. When I went and saw this movie yesterday, I was really, really tired. I accidentally woke up at like 3 a.m. I was dragging ass. And the first two acts, with how much they jumped around, combined with how tired I was while watching the movie, it did make it a little bit jumpy. It made it a little haphazard. And as I'm learning the backstory of these characters, as the movie is trying to relay some of this information to me, I just found myself getting a little lost, I guess you could say. I still am not able to quite draw the connection in this plot between why these characters are going on this quest for this object and what the hell it has to do with freeing Chris Pine's daughter from Hugh Grant's clutches. I still can't draw that connection with that, which I think is partially my fault for being so tired while watching the movie, but also I think the movie had a lot of trouble conveying the connection between the two, which, if you are hearing this right now and you want to clarify that for me in the comments, I would be very grateful if you did so. If you were able to draw that connection easily, I give you bravo points, and I bid you adieu and say that you are smarter than I. I just couldn't quite draw the connection. It made it really hard to really care about these characters, no matter really how much information they conveyed about each of them, their backstory, whatever it might have been. There was just nothing memorable about any of them. Although they are distinct, they're not very memorable characters. The only exception to that is Michelle Rodriguez's character, who I think I cared about the most, but it isn't saying much because by the time everything was all said and done, I still didn't care all that much. It's not a criticism of any of their performances. I think it's more so the movie's inability to communicate effectively why I should care about each of these characters in that particular domain. So that's one big criticism I had for the movie, and I will say it really does hamper down the experience in that way. Now, that can also kind of translate over into the plot or the story in this movie. I myself still have trouble distinguishing between the two. To me, they're one and the same, and I use them interchangeably. So if you have opinions on that, comment below. I'd love to hear how wrong I am about both of those definitions here. So this plot summary that I talked about earlier: the charming thief and a band of unlikely adventurers embark on an epic quest to retrieve a lost relic, but things go dangerously awry when they run afoul of the wrong people. That plot is quite accurate, and what really sucks is the movie doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty much beyond that. This is very much a very surface level film that doesn't get you to really think or appreciate anything beyond that, which is fine. I can tell that this movie was not made for that purpose. However, it really limits the ceiling that this movie can have to just being a fun time at the movies, which is okay because not every movie is going to be some masterpiece directed by Christopher Nolan, Quentin Tarantino, or Steven Spielberg, or what have you. But it just, I really felt, I didn't feel slighted, but I just felt kind of bummed. I'm like, man, there's enough here that's got the makings and the potential to really dive into these characters and get me to care and about the plot and what's going on. But it just really, it doesn't. It feels very much like you're on a quest in a video game that you have to complete. Along the way, you're recruiting characters, you're gaining abilities, you are running into obstacles, you're overcoming that obstacles, you got to get creative, and it feels very much like a game in that way. Like, and maybe that's a pro of the movie, maybe that's a con, but it almost felt so shallow. No, that's not the way I want to put that. It feels shallow in the fact that it is unable to really dig into deeper themes that arise within the plot and this quest that you're on. Because like once the quest is over, that's just kind of that. So that's where I rest on the plot of this movie. I think it's in part of what makes it very forgettable. It doesn't scratch beyond the surface, which I think is a shame. However, it does enough to serve its purpose, which is to be a fun, entertaining time at the movies. What else do I really feel strongly about this movie in? You know what? Let me talk about the comedy just a little bit. So I mentioned earlier that with the trailer of this movie, that a lot of the funny moments were in the trailer, and that does remain true. However, reflecting on the experience, because I saw this movie about 24 hours ago, I did laugh quite a bit at this film. I really did. I can distinctly recall a couple of instances where I'm like, wow, I'm really having a good time and I'm enjoying this. Having said that, is this movie so funny that it's going to stick out in the zeitgeist of my mind and be remembered as a triumph in comedy? Absolutely not. But full disclaimer on that, when it comes to comedy, I am very hard to please. I don't know what it is. Like when it comes to comedy in my brain, I'm very hard to appease in that regard. Some of the humor that I think is portrayed in this movie is more so wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And for me, I've grown pretty tired of it. Honestly, I like humor that's a little bit more subtle, a little bit more witty. And with this movie, I think it's that wink, wink, nudge, nudge, which it works for a lot of people. It really does. I mean, Marvel uses it very time. It's the one example that comes out in my mind. I'm sick of the Marvel franchise. I can't stand it. It's way too mainstream for me to enjoy. That's a whole nother conversation altogether. But nevertheless, I digress here. That style of humor, it will work for you. It probably won't work for me. But I will say the movie has enough variety in its comedy to still get people like me who are really harsh on comedy to laugh. So it does get creative and it does have variety in that way. So I've criticized this movie a lot for its faults. I have very seldomly pointed out the things that I enjoy about it. Let me talk a little bit more about that. The one thing I will say in this movie, one, I did really enjoy Michelle Rodriguez's character, and I enjoyed Michelle Rodriguez's performance. I thought she was the best part of the entire movie. The other thing I will say that the best part is the final act of the film. Up until the final act of the movie, I had seen a very surface level, a really haphazard, a really confusing plot that felt shallow, and a little bit of fun, but just not being very, very memorable or interesting. And the third act, a one scene occurs. Like I said, I never give away spoilers because that's just not my style. A shift occurs in the scene, and I finally start to buy into the experience. The movie finally takes a moment to collect itself, slow down, and quite literally pivot into its final act. And from there on, I finally started to understand, one, what was going on, and two, really enjoy the experience that was unfolding before me. why is that? I can't quite put my finger on it. I think maybe it just because it had all of these characters in one setting. It finally took its time to explore the options, maybe have a little bit of exposition to kind of recap of what's been going on. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe it pushed the characters to their limits and finally found a fundamental shift in all of them, which really made things really cathartic and really interesting. And now that I'm kind of saying it out loud, maybe it's the character growth that finally started to get realized is where I started to get on board with this movie, because it felt like these characters weren't just, for lack of a better term, plastic pieces on a board game that we're playing. Yeah, maybe that's a little harsh, but that's the best way I can put it. I don't mean it to sound sinister in any way, but that's just the best way I can convey that information to all of you. So the final act, I think, is the best part of the movie. It does a really great job of wrapping things up nicely. We get the catharsis and character growth I think that this movie was long missing. And if the entire film just kind of slowed down a little bit and took its time with these characters more throughout this experience, I think I would have really enjoyed it a lot more than I did. Because on the whole, the third act was so good that it turned my opinion from not liking this movie into actually enjoying the experience and maybe even giving it a second shot. If somebody asked me to go see this movie again today, I would go see it again just to give it another chance and to maybe wrap some things up in my mind that I might have missed on my first viewing, which I encourage all of you to do. Watching movies multiple times, it's good for the soul. You learn a lot. You find a lot more things to appreciate or maybe not so appreciate. You form different opinions. That's just how life goes. You learn. So overall, when it comes to the experience of this movie, just to kind of, I guess, sort of recap all of my thoughts, because I really don't think I have any other thoughts in this movie other than what I have conveyed to all of you today. Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. I would recommend seeing it. If I've got to give it some numerical score of some kind, I would give it a 6 out of 10. I'd give it a 6 out of 10. I would say that I liked it. I'd recommend seeing it. The ideal setting for this, if you love Dungeons & Dragons, you're going to go watch this. You're going to have a fun time with it. You're going to bring your friends. Go play D&D. Maybe have your D&D session before this or after this. I don't know. Make a whole day of it. Honestly, you honestly could. And you'd probably have a good day ahead of you. For the casual moviegoer like myself who doesn't love D&D, I think that your mileage is going to vary quite widely. If you're a casual moviegoer, don't know if you'll love this one. If you are a film regular like myself, I think you will find some enjoyment here. If for nothing else than to see some superstars like Hugh Grant, Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez kind of do their thing, be a little charismatic, be a little bit exciting, show off their talent, there's something for you there as well. So that's sort of overall my opinion of the movie. I don't really have too much to say about that, so I'm going to wrap up the conversation here. And I will say, I want to thank all of you for embarking on this conversation with me. If you are enjoying this type of content, I'd be honored, I would be excited if you would be willing to like the video, or if you have thoughts on Dungeons & Dragons, Honor Among Thieves. I would love to hear your perspective in the comments below. Share this with a friend. Tell them all about it. If they're trying to pass time on their commute, share this video with them. Give them something to listen to for about 25 to 30 minutes, no matter how long their drive might be, or if they're on a walk or what have you. And if you guys like content like this and you want to talk about movies more, I am on pretty much every platform. I'm on TikTok, I am on Instagram, I am on Twitter, although I'm not super active on that, podcast platforms, YouTube, whatever. If you want to find me, check out the links in the description below. I am trying to shift my content a little bit, as I mentioned at the top of this episode, to be a little bit more relaxed, maybe a little bit more long form, a little bit more diverse. I might make a personal channel. I might make a channel just dedicated to movies. I might make another one just dedicated to video games, but you get the idea. So I want to thank you all for joining me for today. I will end it here. And I just want to say that if you go see Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, I hope you have an excellent time. And until next time, if you like this and want to check out more, check out the links in the description below or these end cards up above. Once again, this has been the Bankrupt Hippo YouTube channel. I've been Bryce, and until next time, have a great day, everybody.